Hi everyone, delonewolf here. Welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. And well, last week, pretty interesting for me personally. I played a decent amount of EVE Online and I got some extremely nice rewards from exploration. On the news front, we have the patch notes for the October release that's coming next week already. And I would describe it mostly as a balance maintenance patch. Yet again, nothing too major on the new stuff at the moment in EVE Online, which I think is actually normal now that I think about it, because later this month, I think it's the 19th of October or something like that, we have EVE Vegas, of course, and who knows what kind of news comes out there, because, well, people are eagerly awaiting stuff on Nova, the development path for EVE Online, and of course, what might happen with EVE Online and CCP. Now that Pearl Abyss is of course going to acquire CCP this month as well. So yeah, maintenance patch basically, but looking forward to all of the stuff that is coming or that is going to happen this month as well. Sounds pretty interesting. As always, well, not as always, but as we do now, we'll take a quick look at the New Eden store. At the moment, nothing really on sale. There is a plex sale happening, but it's not here because the 500 plex for Omega time is still going at the normal rate here. So that is nothing too special. We still have the Imperium Jubilee skin that is at the forefront of what's happening at the moment. I think it looks really cool, but I don't tend to fly Amar too much myself. Maybe for the Confessor, but I already have a couple of cool Confessor skins, so I personally don't feel like buying any of that. Maybe the Damnation, damn, that does look really cool, that Damnation. But yeah, waiting for sales. I'm actually a little bit surprised that we don't see that many sales in the New Eden store. In the last couple of weeks we haven't really spotted anything too special. That means we are moving on to the market, and as always we are starting with plex and stuff. That is going to be at 220. Let's write that down and let's get started. And as I was already saying, plex in GTAG gone down to almost 3 million ISK, buyers down to 2.9 million ISK. That's in GTAG itself. If we go for the player owned trade hubs, well, it's pretty much the same. That's quite interesting. The lowest seller is actually in GTAG Station. A couple jumps out and up to 9 jumps out. We are talking 3 million, 11, 12,000 ISK. And for the buyers, they do go up to almost 3 million as well, 2,960,000 ISK. That means that we should be landing close to the 3 million ISK mark. It's kind of strange to see that the average prices are actually below that on the chart, because with this, that should mean that the buyers are really winning out majorly against the sellers, that people are dumping their plex for those buyers who have increased volumes. Yep, slightly increased volumes here. So we might actually see a bit of a pullback in the price of plex. I personally do think this is entirely due to a plex sale. It's not in the New Eden store, as I said, but I saw a Reddit post that is like 15% off or something like that at the moment for Omega time somewhere. Don't exactly know where it is, but it will have its impact on the market. I think we're seeing that right here. Next up, we've got the multiple pirate trading certificates. That is kind of obvious that there is a sale going on then, because you have this massive volume spike followed by a decrease in price back to 1 billion ISK. Sellers just above 1 billion ISK, buyers are just below 1 billion ISK as well. So it's very much a tandem move, and both of them stay very close together, which does make that pretty interesting. But yeah, you know, you can easily grab a multiple pirate trading certificate for 1 billion ISK at this point, and you can see the potential 1.2, 1.5 billion even at the high point last year was possible as well. The real question I think you should ask yourself is, do you expect some hype to be built up at EVE Vegas for the winter expansion? Potentially, of course, right? New gates, that could be very interesting, and we'll see. I think choosing to take advantage of these little dips and this pretty major dip here in the training certificate depends on your expectations for EVE Vegas and for EVE Online in the near future. A winter hype with winter war is always something that I think is in the cards, and that can definitely mean very high prices for these goods specifically. Next up, the skill extractor following plex very closely, so a small dip here down to 340 million on the chart, 340 for the sellers, 331 for the buyers. Here it's definitely mostly the player-owned trade hubs that are dictating the sell price. You have to go up to almost 345 million for the sellers in JITA itself. Next up, we have the skill injectors. Let's start with the large scale injectors that are basically hovering at the 700 million part. And on that front, a very interesting post on last week's EVE talk. I do want to share it with you guys that don't take a look at the comments. The reason why we have this strange difference where plex have gone up for almost 2 months and the large scale injectors that have gone down for 2 months. I usually look at demand thinking, are there reasons to grab new skill points? Do we expect new skills to come out or something like that? But they told me to take a look at the supply side of things, and they're saying that they've got very nice margins on production because of this, the multiple pilot train certificate that was actually so low for such a long time. It allowed skill farms to really get multiple characters going very cheaply, and if you can then of course get the best implants there, get the maximum return, it means that skill points themselves have been produced super cheaply on these very cheap pilot train certificates. Something that I hadn't really thought about, but if you think about it here, you've got 1, 2, 3 major potential buy opportunities for less than a billion ISK. And then if you take a look at the skill injector price, you can see that it's also here in June that we started that decline. So again, multiple pilot trading certificates, second and third buy opportunity in June. Maintained lower prices than average for a while there as well, and that was finally, it takes some time to take advantage of this as well in your own skill point farms. So as a result, we have that little bit of a delayed response here, but we also have very much lower prices for the small scale injectors. Now if we take a look at that here, let's say that we want to time that June start with the multiple parentheses sell point, then you have practically 1-2 months difference. And so here we see slightly higher prices. We haven't really gotten to that bottom price, and here we've got yet another peak. We can expect then, if my thinking is correct and if the theory is correct, that it'll take at least another 2 months before the effect of increased prices for multiple pilot trading certificate will show up in the skill points market, in the farms, and thus in the large scale injector price range. So at the moment it is really looking like very low prices for the large scale injectors are here to stay for a little bit, and I think it holds a lot of water. I think it makes a lot of sense to tie supply and thus price of the skill point part of these injectors to the multiple pilot training certificates. We'll see in a couple of months how true this is. We can expect a slight increase in price to happen as a result of the slightly higher average prices, and then if through the winter we could sustain much higher prices, we'll have to see how that works out. But definitely a very interesting explanation, and in my opinion it might be correct. Next up we've got the small scale injectors. So same pattern, slight tick up, trying to get back to 140 million ISK, which is working for the sellers, 144 there, 137 million for the buyers, but definitely also at a pretty low point for the year. And yeah, if you're looking for those investments, I would say if you have a long enough horizon and if you think that the theory holds water, keep an eye on the multiple pilot trade certificates. If that dip didn't happen, then I would have said, yeah, go on and try to grab a couple, because at some point that price is going to go back up for the production of skill points. For the daily alpha injector, that comes directly from CCP, so it's not created by the players. As a result, we've got a completely different price mechanic there, holding at around 60 million ISK. 59 million for the sellers, 55 million for the buyers. A little bit higher than average, so I would say maybe there is some interest from alpha clones coming back after the summer that are interested in the daily alpha injectors. Next up, let's move on to the minerals at 9:30. There we go, and it's really not good news. I think you can already have spotted some of that from the ticker. If Tritanium wants to load, a little bit of a delay on that. Let's see what's happening here to the trade window. Oop. Yeah, a little bit of lag. Cheetah, what's happening? Jita local 1500, nothing too crazy, but all right. There we go. We are back, and titanium selling now for 5 ISK. It was actually 4.99 for the lowest sell order when I was taking a look at the prices for the ticker. Bars coming in at 4.79, and if you look at the chart here, we are definitely back at the average price. I would say almost less than average. If you're not selling for 5 ISK or more, I would say hold on for a better opportunity. It's really right on the edge, in my opinion. You can still, I think, try to sell. I mean, it's still 5 ISK, it's still somewhat okay, but we had to give back all the gains that we made during the war when the Imperium started blowing up lots of keep stars. So yeah, back to 5 ISK, back to the normal place, and I think you can also tell from the numbers, 2 billion, 2 billion, 2 billion, and the margin that is starting to be created between sellers and buyers, that the pressure is on and that we are very likely to go even lower. For pyrite, that just doesn't get any worse than this. Starts the year at above 5 ISK, which was already a super low price, and then just keeps going down now to a 1 year low point of less than 3.5 ISK. 3.4 for the sellers, 3.24 for the buyers, 2 billion ISK for the sellers. And on that note, right, this is like historically low, crazy low prices, should mean very low Tech 1 prices as well, very affordable ships. And from the CSM minutes, I did read that CCP is not so much worried about where minerals are at. You know, I guess that the theory that I was also holding, that they actually like the Tech 1 ships to be very affordable, easy to use and lose, in order to give alpha clones an easy supply of ships in order to learn the game, to get into PvP and to do stuff like that. So yeah, I got the vibes that I got. I didn't read through the whole CSM minutes, but on that question, I think that CCP said that they were sort of okay where the minerals were at. Perhaps a little bit of tweaking was in order or possible, but nothing too major. I think that's important to note. Their worry is actually with the ISK supply from bounties. And, you know, I think that the comment that surprised me a little bit was that the majority of bounties created in Nullsec is being created by carriers and super capitals. So it's not like the fix or navy issues and those kinds of bots that a lot of people say, yeah, they're botting that up in those small little ships. That's actually not the biggest part of the bounties. It's mostly capitals and super capitals that are too strong at it. So that is something that was definitely on the radar for CCP. It was said, I think, by CCP Larrikin that the ISK supply was not sustainable. And so you can expect action there. Don't expect a lot of action in the mineral market, which means, yeah, all-time low prices for pyrite, less than 3.4, 3.5 ISK. Next up, we've got Mexalon, that is also going on the decline and actually reaching a 1 year low point of less than 60 ISK at this point. That is worrying. 59.71 for the sellers, 56.21 for the buyers. So Titanium is the only one that is still somewhat holding on, but if you look at the pattern of the others, obviously the pressure is on and we can expect lower prices across the board at this point. Well, you know, it's summertime, a little bit less activity, and no real wars. I mean, since, let's say, August, September, things have quieted down quite a little bit there. And it's also something that I personally think, what do you do when you get back into the game for the first time, when things are quieter? You do a lot of, the miners tend to be the ones that either stick around or the ones that come back first. I think, you know, just get their production cycles back up and running. And then if they've got other alts that they use for PvP and stuff like that, start using the funds that they make there in order to, yeah, to get more characters online and things like that. I think that does tend to happen, and you get a big surge of consumption and of players that are really PvP minded that would come in if action would start in Nullsec. So if they see major battles coming up all of a sudden, then you get a different type of player that comes back. And I think that, yeah, at the moment, summer is ending. Who is coming back? the guys that enjoy the game, even if there are no major Nosik wars or anything like that happening. And this is the result, 1 year low point yet again now for Mexalon. Isogen landing at 20 ISK, but obviously also a 1 year low point at this point. 1987 in fact for the sellers and 1889 for the buyers. So 20 ISK for the sellers, 19 ISK for the buyers. A very cheap 1 year low point on the Mexalon. I also want to say I wouldn't sell at this price. I would just hoard it, start to build up your stocks, wait for some action to happen somewhere, some real destruction, and then try to sell at a higher price. For Noxium next, again, same pattern I think here, right? Trying to hold on to 300 ISK, but basically failing at that, sometimes dipping to 275. Sellers are coming in now at 288 and buyers at 270. That is not the good news. I do think that will start moving in the 250 to 300 price range pretty soon. Next up, we've got Zydrine that also is continuing its slow descent. The pattern is pretty obvious what happened to mining. You know, the Orcals took over, but it's not only that. You've got the moon mining in HiSec as well, I think, that will have generated massive supplies. And as a result, we're landing close to 400 ISK at this point for Zydrine, 425 for the sellers and 400 ISK for the buyers. Same, not good looking chart for Megasite, now breaking through the 500 ISK barrier, 494 for the sellers and 485 for the buyers. So the trend for HiSec minerals, for minerals in general that are tied to the Tech1 economy, is pretty obvious. 1 year low points, lots of pressure, which means in general also very cheap Tech1 ships, of course. Morphite next is trying to hold on to 9,000 ISK, but from time to time breaking through that, so we should have close to that on the sellers. Yep, 8,970 for the first seller, and then we've got 8,600 for the buyers. Investment territory, I think you can go lower, below 8,500 on the buy side, I think would be my go-to move for Morphite. But yeah, minerals, pretty depressed situation if you like mining yourself, but it does show, in my opinion, the popularity of the activity itself. And you know, it's something that I don't think CCP is going to change at the moment, because they seem to be pretty happy with affordable Tech1 chips and an economy that you know, is turning lots of volume. Next up, we have PI. Moving on to that at 1720. Like that. Let's go over these. At the moment, I'm still looking for the investment opportunities in advanced PI materials. I personally like that we saw. I've been keeping an eye on CC as well. I haven't spotted the new advertisement centers just yet, but those clearly followed the XL, L, and M formula. So I'm highly confident, not sure at 100%, but I'm highly confident that at least those will use advanced PI materials. And then there's no reason for me to believe that stuff like the Sino Jammer will not use advanced PI materials. And so a chart here like the broadcast nodes that's landing at 2 million ISK with buyers at 2 million ISK and sellers as well is, I think, a very good place to grab a couple of those, especially if you want to build some stuff, like some propaganda towers sound interesting to me. Yeah, this is definitely a pretty low price, close to the 1 year lows. 2 million is at the low point for broadcast nodes, and you can grab quite a few of them at this price range. I do think that because of these volume spikes, there are lots of people that are thinking the exact same thing. So there's always people that are going to protect the 2 million mark. Once we go below that, you always have people that snatch it up to get ready for the next set of structures. Construction blocks is crawling out of the hole, went as low as 10,000 ISK, 1 year low point, and is trying to head back to the 12,000 average, I would say. 11,900 for the sellers, 11,000 for the buyers. Pretty healthy margin there, but we are back to average prices for the sellers at least. Buyers are maybe a touch below average. Consumer electronics next, after a very strong August point up to almost 17,000 ISK, we are back to an average price 12,500, and we've actually stabilized around that range. 13,300 for the sellers, though 12,000 for the buyers, so it's a very wide margin between the two. If you do have consumer electronics, have the patience for a sell order. You're getting way much for that, and I do think it's worth it. 12,000 for the Buyers is nothing too crazy either, and you can see that the price range on the daily averages switches quite hard in between those two. So that normally means that on some days you get the impatient sellers that just go straight for those buy orders, so you can grab consumer electronics at around 12,000 ISK. But on other days they have the patience, and people that need them are forced to go to those sell orders, and then you get these high average prices. So pretty wide margin between these two, but currently moving in the average range. Coolants next. Last week, yeah, a little bit of hesitation from time to time. Today on Eve Talk for the JITA market. I'm sure it'll show up at some point. You just need a little bit of patience. There it is. Yeah, at a 1 year high point is diving back below 11,000 ISK on the 5-day moving average, which is the blue line, but still holding quite strongly. And even more hesitation here. All right, 11,000 ISK for the first seller, most of them at 11,200, and the buyers coming in at 10,200. That means there's a bit of a gap opening up between sellers and buyers, putting a bit of pressure on the price, which should mean a slightly less demand for coolants. When it comes to enriched uranium, that is still going strong, now breaking through the 13,000 ISK barrier and is very close to a 1 year high point. Sellers coming in at 13,786 ISK and the buyers at 12,892. That is again a decent margin between those two, but definitely selling above average at the moment. The integrity response drones, that is very, very interesting. A sharp drop off and a 1 year low point reached of almost 2 million ISK yesterday or a couple of days ago. Very interesting. Sellers still at 2.2 million and a bit above that. Buyers though 2,062,000 ISK, diving below that 2.1 million ISK mark. That is a buy opportunity in the integrity response drones. That is outside of the norm. Definitely something to look into for the buyers. By the way, I'm also quickly going to mention this at this point. You see the integrity response drones in the ETH ticker as well, just like strontium, tungsten, and fullerenes. That will become the home of my actual investment. So I have bought fullerenes, I've bought integrity response drones. I've got some strontium still lying around. I want to see what that does as well. So it's to keep an eye on my investments. Tungsten carbide, successful purchase at, I think it was 168 or something like that. And then plex as well. No, plex, no. But the Zwepel is the one exception. It's on here because I've got a buy order going, but I haven't been able to purchase them at the price that I want just yet. But just a quick note on that, seeing these integrity response drones, I already have a nice investment in those from the buyers, and as a result we have even more of a buy opportunity. I might make a second move on that. Mechanical parts, fuel related, not at the high point of 12,000 ISK, but trying to hold on quite nicely at an above average price. 11,245 for the sellers, 10,800 for the buyers. So that's fuel-related. PI materials are still doing quite strong, still going quite strong, and the nuclear reactors diving back below 100,000 is not reaching the peaks that I would love to see. 130, 150. That is not happening. So it's 100,000 for the sellers, 88,000, 89,000 for the buyers. A little bit disappointed by the lack of real volatility in the nuclear reactors. You can make some tiny little trades on this, but it's very difficult to time the market. And its major problem, look at the instability in the volumes there. That is definitely not too good. If that would have meant more instability in the price as well than it did in the last couple of months, this would have been great. But for now, I feel it's quite dangerous to be trading in the nuclear reactors. Although grabbing them for less than 90,000 ISK, I think is definitely a possibility, but have a longer horizon than Twitch or quick trades that are very visible. Doesn't seem to be happening. The organic mortar applicators, very interesting as well, breaking through the 1 million mark on the downside a couple of days ago. 1 million for the sellers, 956,000 ISK for the buyers. Yet another actually more pronounced buy opportunity, breaking the 1 year low barrier here, and you're able to grab organic mortar applicators for less than 1 million ISK. Worth it. If I find the time, I'll go to JITA. That's a buy order that I think personally I would place. Next up, we've got the robotics. First sign of a bit of pressure on those PI materials for fuels, because that is now breaking through the 100,000 ISK barrier, which even historically is a little bit below average. 98,000 for the sellers, 93,000 for the buyers. Very narrow margin there, but clearly some first signs of pressure. Also some first signs of hesitation in these PI materials for fuels. Definitely something to keep in mind. Self-harmonizing power core next, actually going a little bit higher, taking off from the 2 million mark. So here late August would have been your buy opportunity for less than 2 million ISK. Now it's 2.1 million for the sellers, a bit above it, and 2.1 million for the buyers as well. Sellers just above, buyers just below. Not as good as the others still. If you look at the entire chart, and if you look at a potential spike for, potentially like an announcement for new structure, which again, Vegas, not that long in the future. If you want to take your positions, I would advise you to take a trip to Jita. Yeah, this is still an okay price, right? This is definitely still nothing too crazy. Superconductors next, something that I'm producing, unfortunately going back down towards 11,000 ISK. 12,200 still though for the sellers, 11,000 for the buyers. So I would say sellers are still at the average, buyers are below average. Again, a gap opening up there between the two. Gotta be a little bit careful when that happens. Test culture is bouncing off the 7,500 mark, so I wouldn't say that we're in the buy opportunity anymore. A little bit too late, but you're still grabbing it for 7,800. So less than 8,000 ISK for the buyers is possible. 8,500 for the sellers is, well, below average, but it's not the low point anymore. And finally, we got wetware mainframes also showing potentially a buy opportunity, going here for 2.1 million on the chart. We've been there before, but not as pronounced as this on the 5-day moving average, which makes it interesting. 2.2 million for the sellers and a bit below 2.1 million for the buyers. I would honestly say that if you still have PI purchases to do, especially when you plan to make more structures yourself, this is the time to do so. A lot of them are in a very interesting place, and yeah, if you want to take the gamble for a big trade, I would do so now as well, but keep in mind, I personally don't like to take very big trades. I like to spread it around in smaller investments. So I'm going to make some moves. I already made a move on the integrity response drones, but nothing too crazy. But yeah, Vegas can be quite major, I think, for this category. Next up, advanced moon materials at 27.15. There we go. And so I've got a couple purchases here as well. Let's start here with the crystalline carbonite, breaking through 150. Yeah, 154 still for the sellers, but 148 for the buyers. So here we are talking about a 1-year low point. We called all of this investment territory, yeah, this is starting to be even more pronounced. So if you're looking to buy the carbide related materials, this one looks quite interesting. We'll take a look at the end at the ticker. Next up, we've got the Fernite carbide that is actually bouncing off of the 150, but if crystalline carbonite is any indication, pressure will still be on, selling for 152, buyers at 137. That is well below the entire chart. 137, let's see if we can generate something close to that. I would say for the buyer side of Fernite carbide, that's worth a buy order in my opinion. Next up, at number 3, we have the titanium carbide. Continued pressure as well. 1-year low point a couple of days ago with an average of just above 160. 177.5 for the sellers, 163 for the buyers. This to me indicates that again, buyers are picking up the titanium carbide at the moment. Yeah, potentially again, very interesting. Tungsten carbide. Ooh, that is, we saw it had some momentum last week, but it held, I think, at close to 200 ISK. Now breaking straight through the 175, sellers coming in at 172, buyers at 154. So they're looking to normalize all carbides around 150 ISK. This is a very sharp drop off, and if of course the potential highs here are in the indication, tungsten carbide also interesting to make a move. So it looks like the moon mining pressure is on. There is one note to make here, I think a very important note from the CSM minutes. something that CCP said about moon mining in HiSec. Players have blown through their expectations massively. There is massively more moon mining happening in HiSec than CCP thought there would ever be, and so as a result, be a little bit careful with the investments in these categories. Don't go too gung-ho with the numbers, I would say, because it is very much possible that these increased supplies are actually looking for a new normal average, and if it's any indication that the volumes are way more than CCP thought, we might be looking at lower prices that might become here to stay. So be a little bit careful on that. Next up we have the photonic meta materials. Let's take a look at that. If the chart wants to load, sorry about the lag here guys, there's not that much that I can do about that, but we would love to get to the next segment. So do it? Yeah, I should have clicked and then made the explanation about the CSM minutes, but there we go. Photonic metamaterials holding just below 20,000 ISK. Bit of pressure probably from volumes. If you want to grab the orders, please. There we go. 19,244 for the sellers, 18,200 for the buyers. Volumes here, hundreds of thousands of them coming in, putting a little bit of pressure on the price. We're not at a 1-year low point yet of 15,000 ISK, but we are definitely starting to go below average at this point, I think. Next up, the plasmonic metamaterials, also a little bit of a drop off, breaking through 20,000 ISK here. 19,000 for the sellers, 18,000 for the buyers. Looks like this will have some volatility as well. I would keep the rest of the chart in mind here and keep an eye on 15,000 on the buy orders. We've seen that that is possible on the charts here, so I wouldn't make my move too early on the metamaterials. Next up, we've got the non-linear metamaterials. Same pattern, right? More supplies dropping off of the price. Also, my earlier mention, who is coming back to the game when there's no war, but summer is ending. You've got the miners, so I think that that's partly what's happening here as well. Increased activity, but in the PvE aspects of the game. So non-linear metamaterials, not yet at the 20k, which would be the bottom that I'd keep an eye out for this one, but 21,600 for the buyers, 22,700 for the buyers. Again, wide margin. I think this will have momentum. And then the terahertz metamaterials, after hesitating a big bit and going back to 22,500, the downside is almost inevitable. 21,000 for the sellers, 20,000 for the buyers, and if the rest is any indication, will go lower as well. So yeah, the pressure is on apparently in these, and I'm seeing especially the tungsten carbide now. That looks like quite a sharp drop off. You can see that I already bought some tungsten carbide, so it's pretty obvious that I made a move a bit too early, but there's always time to make a second move on that, of course. Next up, we have the other goods from Advanced Moon Materials. We've got continued pressure on the fermionic condensates, nowhere near the low points, but also clearly breaking away from the high points, getting back to a more average price. 96,400 for the sellers, 93,000 for the buyers. We've got ferrogel next, that after diving very quickly to less than 45,000 is now stabilizing at a bit below that. 45,000 for the first seller, 44,000 for the buyer. Then we've got the Fullerites, which I made a move on too early as well. When below 1,000 ISK, I thought, yep, that looks quite interesting to make a move on that. Is currently landing at 880 ISK apparently. 882 for the sellers, 831 for the buyers, which is probably why I picked all of that up pretty easily. Hypersynaptic fibers actually bouncing up. Okay, a little bit of a different move on this one. Also nowhere near the low points, but also clearly coming off of the high points at the moment, selling for 14,000, a little bit above that, buyers a bit below 14,000. Is definitely a very narrow margin here as well. Hypersynaptic fibers seems to be a little bit different from the rest that's under pressure. Nanotransmitters, more pressure as well, landing at 4,500, buyers at 4,300. If you look at the entire chart, not yet the low points, but potentially starting to be interesting. The phenolic composites going down to 2,500, which I would say is an average price. and very narrow margin here again, so too early to say what's gonna happen here, I think. And then we've got the ceramic fibers finally diving down towards 400 ISK, which I think makes it pretty interesting, especially with buyers at 383, 427 for the sellers. Wider margin, very interesting buy order territory, I think, there potentially for investment. So I think that there are investment opportunities in the advanced move materials. We are dependent, I think, on Nelsec wars and actually a big change of hand in some territories, which is not that easy to see happening, but we can clearly see that prices are going pretty low. On the other hand, keep it in mind that moon mining activity in Nelsec is way higher than CCP expected, and so that should mean higher supplies than they thought and perhaps a breaking of the averages of prices on the downside. Next up, we have the Tech 2 ships at 35 minutes. Like that. Let's go over these. I think that and there is the Aries move going from 27 million back up to 38 million, 32 million for the buyers. I'm assuming that the Aries is the one that will keep its interdiction immunity, or is it the other one? Let's take a quick look. Terran is then, quick look at that one. Yeah, diving down. So obviously the Aries back for popularity. I'm not sure how to exactly see this move when it comes to the nerf itself. I think that basically interdiction is too important and people will start to make interdiction fleets with the new kinds of interceptors, even if it means lower DPS. I think it is too important to be able to get behind enemy lines, to be able to get through gate camps and things like that. And so here we do have a massive increase in price for the Aries, 38 million for the sellers, 32 million for the buyers at this point. A massive spike. CCP, of course, making changes to the game, which has an influence on the market. The Basilisk is landing at a pretty low point, not a 1-year low point, but close to it. Selling for 238, buyers at 223. If you're looking for that longer term investment and you want to grab some logistics for another war, I think this is an okay time to do so. Cerberus continuing the descent to 1-year low point, now breaking through the 200 million ISK mark on the average. That's crazy. 204 for the sellers, 190 million for the buyers. Yeah, 1-year low point for the Cerberus. If you're looking to buy one of these for use, it's definitely a great time to do so. I think that some fleet buying will start to happen here as well, because I think it's still a very strong platform for Nelsec doctrines as well. But the pressure is on in Tech 2 after the decline in the advanced move materials, I think, and so we will start to see some buy opportunities. I would call the Cerberus for less than 200 million a potential buy order as well. Next up, we've got the Claw. That one is obviously going down because it's losing its interdiction immunity in the patch next week. So here, that's maybe one that I wouldn't make too much of a move on unless you would then expect CCP to actually redesign them a little bit to give them something extra after losing that immunity. That's of course when you would try to grab a couple for less than 20 million ISK, but otherwise you would stay very steer clear from these ships. The Crow then also going down in price to less than 30 million ISK, not as pronounced in the Kaldari ones. I guess the missile, is this a missile ship? Let's take a quick look at that. Yeah, it does have 4 launchers. Missiles are still such a strong weapon system that the move is not as drastic here. 29 million for the sellers, 27.5 for the buyers. The Crusader, after dipping down to 21 million ISK or even less than that, bit of a resurgence, but I think that this one is also losing its immunity, trading at around 25 million. The Guardian, ooh, that is interesting. 1-year low point, averages 210 million ISK. Buyers coming in at less than 200 million ISK. Just like with the Cerberus, this seems pretty interesting if you want to make that Tech 2 purchase. Look at the chart and the buy orders for less than 200 million. That would make a lot of sense. Logistics, you know, for Amar, for armor. So it would make a lot of sense, I think, if you want to have those war spikes become your profit. Next up, we've got the Heretic, also finally breaking through the 70 million mark and seemingly staying there. 69 million for the sellers, but 53 million for the buyers. Look at that super wide margin here. Problem with the Heretic is, of course, the lack of volumes. Then we've got the Hound continuing a slow descent to 25 million ISK here. 25 for the sellers, for the first seller, and then 23 million for the buyers. I would say, yeah, still, you know, if you want to invest in these Tech2 ships, of course, put up a buy order. Don't grab these sell orders, so that you at least have that margin taken. But 23 million for a Hound, look at the entire chart. To me, that makes a lot of sense. The Ishtar, after reaching a low point of 230, is now going back up a little bit. So there does seem to be some interest in the Ishtar all of a sudden. And we are yet again lagging just a little bit. But we'll get through that, I hope. Come on, Ishtar. Come back alive. So what I think, and I forgot to take a look at it on the price history, is that we'll see an increased volume, and one of the patterns that I do think will happen, so it's 280 million for the sellers, 229 for the buyers. That's a very wide margin. And so what I think is happening, there is the increased volume here, is that we will see nullsec entities moving for big purchases, increasing the volumes, increasing the price once we reach those 1 year low points. So look out for the Cerberus. That opportunity might not last very long. They're building fleets, of course, and if they find that they can build some cheap fleets of some good Tech2 ships, they'll make a move. Manticore, same thing, I think here, 30 million as the low point, but then you can see the increase in the volumes, so we're back at 35 million for the Manticore. For some reason, much more expensive and more popular stealth bomber. Next up here, we've got the Nemesis, also okay. So to me here now, that means move to Jita, grab a couple of Hounds, because landing at 25 million, 26 million has apparently been a trigger, and it's already back above 30 million, 32 for the sellers, 29 for the buyers. The Oneros slow descent, but not yet anywhere near a 1 year low point, so that's just a big no for me. We get the Purifier after also reaching a 1 year low point, increased volumes already back at 30 million ISK. Buyers at 28, so that was a slight opportunity here to maybe grab some at like 26 million, something like that. Yep, 26 million as an average price actually. But people are watching these markets like a hawk, and they're often making their moves. So I'm actually a bit surprised that the Hound is continuing that descent to a well below average price at this point. I think we won't have a lot of time to make a move on that. The Raptor is probably... Is then the Raptor losing immunity? And then I'm surprised that the Crow is also going this slow. But alright, I think the Raptor should not lose immunity, or am I wrong on that? I might be wrong on that, because there's no buyers here. 26 million for the sellers, 25 million for the buyers, but clearly a 1 year low point all of a sudden for the Raptor. You know, the interceptor market is kind of strange now. We've got big losers like the Claw, of course, but then all of a sudden here we've got the Ares surging up like that. Maybe they've theory crafted that that's gonna be one of your best options for an interdiction immune fleet or something like that, but very difficult for me to say I'm gonna make moves on the interceptors. And I'd much rather see something like a Hound, maybe a couple of Cerberus and a Guardian, you know, pretty ships that you know will be used, that you know will be lost, and that are clearly showing a buy opportunity. Next up, the Saber here. Volumes are a bit better on this one, but back up above 70 million all of a sudden. 72 million for the sellers, 66.5, so that's not as good a margin as the other interdictor destroyer. Next up here we get the Scimitar, also coming back up a little bit. So alright, interesting. 233 for the sellers now, 206 for the buyers. That is pretty low, pretty wide margin here. Then we've got the Stiletto, that is down below 30 million ISK. And then we've got the Taranis, that is also clearly down below 25 million ISK here all of a sudden. So very interesting situation, kind of a strange mix of signals from the interceptors. So I don't feel confident to tell you guys exactly what to do with these, because you've got this big winner here in the Ares all of a sudden, and then the Taranis is low, but then the Caldari ones are both doing a similar thing. So that one is really weird, but I am seeing some pronounced buy opportunities in the Hound, the Cerberus, and the Guardian it was. And especially on the stealth bomber side, I'm quite surprised to see Purifier going back up, to see Nemesis bouncing back up, and to see the Manticore also maintaining a price of 35 million on the sellers, indicating to me that this is a real buy opportunity for the Hound. There is currently lack of demand, but that it won't last for very long. Next up, we have the Tech Tree ships at 44.25. Like that. As always, we'll start with the destroyers, and yeah, I tried to grab some Vapels at 29 million. I'll give you guys the price as well, but no one bid there, so I think I'll be 0.1 or something like that. We'll take a look here. Confessors, you know, average price 30 million, a little bit down. Some pressure is still visible here, so we've got these hundreds of ships available. Then, you know, sellers try to compete below that for even more of them, around 32 million, but the buyers 28.2 million. I would say now for the Confessor, that's where I would try to put up a buy order close to that price at the moment. Next up, we have the Hecate. That's actually bouncing up, went to 37.5 million, but it's currently selling for 42, and buyers are still at 37 million. Not really a very pronounced buy opportunity. Volume wise, this is also you know, stabilizing, 59, 27. It's not 300, 200, stuff like that anymore. So here we have I think the price we can expect when sellers and buyers are a bit more in line with each other when it comes to the volumes. The Jackdaw, that's a different story though, heading for 30 million on the average as well. The reason being we still have 154 here, but volumes slowly decreasing apparently. Sellers at 35 million, buyers at 30.07 million. That is interesting. 30.7 million actually, so just above 30 million. Yeah, maybe. I still prefer the Confessor, of course, with a buy price well below 30 million all of a sudden. And I will take a look here at this Vapel that's landing at 30 million. And so you still have 420 here, of course, competition starting from 32 million down to 31.4 million. But this is me right here, 29 million, trying to grab a couple. No, that's not me. This is me, 29 million. And people came in and started one-upping me. They are in fact up to 29.6 million for the buy opportunity. So trying to grab these is not easy. I think this buy order doesn't make too much sense anymore at this point. Probably something that I'll look to remove. But now if you look at the Confessor, right, down to 28.2 million, you need to find the right price. You're not going to grab these because these are of course very opportunistic buy orders, but below 29 million, if you time it right, you might be able to grab a couple of Confessors at that price. The volumes are still there, lots of supply. And yeah, the Confessor is the one that I would now consider putting up a buy order at. Next up, we've got the cruisers. Here is the Legion, stabilizing at the current price range, volume-wise 360 at 145 million. Competition starts from there, 132 for the buyers. Not too much to say there. We've got the Loki that is settling at a similar price, 160 million for the sellers, with 316 right here being the bottleneck, the one that is keeping things stable. 150 million for the buyers. Then we've got a Proteus, same pattern, except it's landing at 130 million ISK with 256 of them, and no competition coming in after that. It's obviously the least popular Tech Tree cruiser, so not that many people produce it at the moment, and 120 for the buyers. And then finally we've got the Tengu, that's also landing at a bit above 130, 145 in fact almost for the sellers. Big volumes, nothing too crazy anymore, and 121.5 for the buyers. That is quite a wide margin. Yet again, would I say investments here? It's difficult to say. I'm honestly mostly interested in the destroyers because those tend to have higher volumes. Although that's not the case when it comes to the Tengu, for instance, quite similar. So maybe I like the wide margin here, 121.5 for the Tengu. That is pretty interesting. I think that would be the one that I would consider. Maybe the Loki as well. Less than 150 million. We haven't seen that very often. 1 year low point. And we know that it's the most popular strategic cruiser because of its amazing bonuses to both shield and armor reps. So super versatile. That looks interesting for an investment as well. And then we've got the extra products for this week, which is going to be at 49 minutes. All right. We're going to take a look at the fuels. We see that PI for fuels are super high. We see that moon materials are down quite a bit. Well, how about ice mining? Well, fuels might give us a bit of an idea here. And so what we're seeing here, for instance, is that the helium fuel blocks are actually going down in price, despite seeing high points in the PI materials. So there should be lots of, again, mining, ice mining in this case, bringing in fresh supplies. And as a result, we've got this decrease in price since September. From high points of 22,500 ISK and currently selling for, again, a bit of lag unfortunately, but that does happen. But yeah, this is the reason why I want to check the fuel blocks to see if there is indeed something to my theory that people that are coming back to the game after the summer are the PvE people, many of them miners, and I think it holds up because you've got that pressure on moon materials, which is now also open to high sec. You've got the minerals, of course, which with the common null sec are going down in price. But even in it must be ice mining, considering PI prices, and then the pressure on the fuel blocks. 21,400 for the sellers, 20,200 for the buyers. Healthy margin there as well, and a bit of pressure. Hydrogen fuel blocks, same thing, high point 24,000 ISK, almost 25,000 ISK in fact as well, early summer. Now back down to 21,300 for the sellers, 20,000 for the buyers. Nitrogen fuel blocks, bit of pressure, not as pronounced, but also not such a high point, and as a result around 21,000 again for the sellers, 20,000 for the buyers. And then oxygen fuel blocks, same pattern again, June, July, high points 24,000 ISK, lots of activity before the end of the summer, maybe even some more stuff like that, people putting up lots of structures and moon mining refineries. Then through the summer activity decreases, but the guys that stick around are of course the miners, the PvE guys mostly, and then you even have a bit of a comeback with that pressure through the summer here, in fact, for oxygen fuel blocks, from 24,000 down to 22,000 for the sellers, 21,000 almost for the buyers. Very interesting in my opinion to see this pattern show up again. I would say PI looks like there's plenty of actually buy opportunities, but for me PI here, some very interesting ones, knowing what might be on the horizon for ETH Vegas. And then I'll show you guys the ticker as well. So full rights at 839, I grabbed those. Integrity response drones at 2.1 million. Are we landing at 2 million buyers? Well, 2.1 million. I think that's not too crazy, right? Considering 2.24 million for the sellers, 2.06 million for the first buyers. Grabbing them at 2.1 million, I think feels pretty good. Strontium, I put up 2,300, but this is like a very old something that I have. I'm not even sure if this price is right. Zwepels at 29 million, not able to purchase those unfortunately, but we've got tungsten carbide at 178. Look at what the price is doing. I was a bit early on that, so that was quite easy to grab it. Maybe I should lower my averages by trying 155 or maybe 160 or something like that, but that decrease in price has surprised me a little bit with its volatility, so that is a little bit of an early purchase there, but gives you a bit of an idea on what I did for my investments. And we'll see if I find the time and energy. I'll try to keep you guys up to date as well, but who knows, on some of them we might wait a very long time for a sell opportunity, so this might not be something that sticks around in ETH talk. We'll see how we handle that. Anyways, that's gonna be it for this week then, guys. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you all next time.